Snow whipped across the construction site as millionaire Thomas Whitaker raised his hand to halt the roaring machines. Beneath the shriek of metal, he'd heard something, a faint rhythm, 3 sharp taps coming from under the frozen ground. He frowned, kneeling, pressing his gloved hand into the snow. Again, tap, tap, tap. The crew fell silent. He seized a shovel, digging furiously through ice and dirt until the steel struck something solid. A rusted box emerged, its surface trembling. When he pried it open, the world seemed to stop. Inside was a small girl still breathing. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe, deep in your heart, that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The wind howled across the construction site like a restless spirit that refused to rest. Snow whipped sideways, coating the steel beams and half-frozen concrete with a thin crust of white. Every sound was muffled, swallowed by the storm, except the steady hum of machines cutting through the morning cold. Thomas Whitaker stood near the foundation line, his gloved hands deep in his coat pockets, his gaze fixed on the rising framework. At 40, he had built more towers than he could remember. Yet nothing about this one felt right. Maybe it was the silence between the gusts, or maybe it was the ache in his chest that had been following him all week. Mr. Whitaker shouted the foreman through the wind. "We're ready to pour the next section." Tom gave a quick nod. "Do it." The man signaled the crew. Cement began to flow thick and gray, steaming faintly against the frozen ground. Tom turned away, the crunch of snow loud beneath his boots. He had built a life on precision, numbers, schedules, contracts. But lately he wondered if all that order had buried something he could no longer hear. He was halfway to his truck when it happened. A faint, rhythmic sound, tap, 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 barely audible under the wind. He stopped. Maybe it was metal contracting in the cold. He waited. Nothing. Then again, 3 distinct taps, closer this time. He turned toward the noise, scanning the site. "Hold it," he yelled. "Shut everything down." Engines coughed to silence. The site fell eerily still. Workers glanced at one another, unsure. Tom stepped forward, boots crunching into the snow-crusted dirt. The wind dropped, and for a moment there was nothing but the sound of his own breathing. Then tap, 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 slow, deliberate, coming from the ground just ahead of him. "Give me a shovel," he ordered. "Sir, it's probably just pipes." "Shovel," he repeated. The foreman hesitated, then handed one over. Tom sank the blade into the icy soil. The cold bit through his gloves, but he didn't stop. Each thrust sent shivers up his arms, each scoop heavier than the last. Workers gathered in silence, their faces pale against the white morning. "What's he doing?" someone whispered. Tom didn't answer. He dug faster, breath coming in short bursts. Then the metal clang of steel striking steel. He dropped to his knees, brushing snow and dirt aside with his bare hands until a flat, rusted surface emerged. A box, the size of a small trunk, its edges crusted with frost. "Call rescue," Tom said quietly. "Sir, now," he pried at the latch. It resisted, frozen shut. With one hard pull, it gave way. The lid creaked open, releasing a rush of cold, damp air that smelled of earth and metal. Inside lay a small figure, a girl perhaps 7 years old, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her skin was pale, her lips blue. For one terrifying moment, she looked lifeless. Then her chest rose, barely perceptible. "Oh my God," the foreman breathed. Tom's voice was steady, low. "Get the ambulance here." Now, he reached in, lifting the girl carefully. She weighed almost nothing. Her hair was tangled with ice, her fingers stiff. Tom pressed her against his coat, trying to warm her. "Hang on, kid," he murmured, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Hang on." He started running, past the machinery, past the silent workers, through the swirling snow. Each step sent pain through his lungs, but he didn't stop. The sound of sirens grew faintly in the distance. He shouted into the wind. "Over here!" Paramedics met him at the gate. He laid the girl on a stretcher, still gripping her tiny wrist as if letting go would make her vanish. One of the medics asked, "Do you know her?" Tom shook his head. "No, I just heard her." Hours later in the hospital corridor, Tom sat alone. His clothes were soaked through his hands, shaking though he didn't feel cold anymore. A nurse approached, speaking softly. "She's alive, weak but stable." Tom exhaled for the first time in hours. Did she say anything? The nurse smiled faintly. Just one word. Lily. He repeated it under his breath. Lily. The name felt fragile, like something that could melt if spoken too loud. Outside, snow kept falling soft and relentless. Tom stood by the window, watching the flakes gather on the glass. Somewhere beneath all that white underlayers of noise and silence, a faint tapping still echoed in his mind. 3 steady beats, the sound that had changed everything. The next morning, the world outside Tom's window was buried beneath a new layer of snow. The city had slowed to a crawl, muffled by white silence. Inside the hospital, the faint beeping of machines mixed with the whisper of nurses' shoes against polished floors. Tom walked down the corridor carrying a small paper bag, the breakfast he had barely touched. The nurse at the front desk looked up. "She's awake," she said softly. "You can go in, Mr. Whitaker." But she doesn't talk much. Tom nodded, taking a slow breath before opening the door. The girl sat upright in bed, her tiny frame swallowed by hospital blankets. Her eyes were wide and dark, studying him carefully, as if deciding whether he was real. The pale winter light coming through the window made her seem even smaller. "Hi, Tom," said quietly. "You're safe now." No answer, only the steady rhythm of her shallow breathing. He placed the paper bag on the bedside table. "I brought oatmeal and juice. The nurse says you need to eat." She didn't move. Her hands hidden beneath the blanket trembled slightly. Tom didn't push. He pulled a chair closer and sat. For a while, neither spoke. The heater clicked on, filling the silence with its low hum. Finally, she whispered, almost too soft to hear. "Where am I?" "In a hospital," Tom said gently. "In Akron. You were found at a construction site." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Was it snowing?" "Yes," he replied, "snowing hard." She nodded as if that explained everything. After a moment, she asked, "Are you the one who found me?" Tom hesitated. "Yes." "Why were you digging? I heard you." Her small brow furrowed. "No one else did. Sometimes," Tom said, "the world gets too loud. You just have to listen past the noise." She looked at him, for the first time really looked, and then turned away. "My name is Lily," he smiled faintly. "That's a pretty name." The nurse entered with medication and fresh water. Lily flinched, eyes darting toward the door. Tom rose, standing between her and the nurse without realizing it. "It's okay," he said softly. "She's here to help." After the nurse left, Lily relaxed a little, though she still avoided looking at the IV in her arm. Later that day, a social worker arrived, an older woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She thanked Tom for his help, then explained that no family had come forward. "We'll keep searching," she said, "but for now, the department needs someone to take temporary guardianship." "Only for a few days." Tom stared at the paper she slid across the table. "You mean me?" "You're the only one she responds to," the woman said. "Children remember voices that make them feel safe." He wanted to say no. His life didn't have space for this. He was a man who lived on schedules, not on lullabies. But when he glanced toward the bed, Lily was watching him, her fingers clutching the blanket. Something in her eyes, a plea without sound, made the word yes escape his mouth before logic could stop it. That evening, he drove her home through falling snow. The city lights blurred into halos, and the car's heater struggled against the cold. Lily sat quietly in the back seat, staring at the frost forming on the window. Tom's house stood at the edge of the woods, a modern shell of glass and stone. It had been built for someone who didn't plan to stay. When they stepped inside, the silence felt heavy. "You can take that room," he said, pointing toward a guest bedroom. "There's a lamp if you don't like the dark." She didn't move until he switched it on. Warm yellow light spread across the room. She nodded and walked in slowly, touching the corner of the bed, as though testing if it was real. Tom left her door slightly open. Later that night, while he worked in his office, he heard the faint creak of floorboards. Peeking through the crack, he saw her sitting on the floor near the window, drawing small circles on the glass with her finger, whispering something he couldn't hear. He didn't interrupt. He only turned off his computer and sat quietly listening to the wind outside. Days passed. Lily spoke little, but her presence began to shape the rhythm of the house. She would appear silently in the kitchen, sit across from him while he read, or follow him into the backyard to watch the snowfall. One morning, Tom made pancakes. He slid one onto her plate. "You need more than air for breakfast." She blinked at the plate, then picked up the fork. After a few hesitant bites, she whispered, "It's good. That's a start, he said. Later, he found her in the hallway arranging his old blueprints into neat rows on the floor. They have to be straight, she murmured. When they're straight, I can breathe. He crouched beside her. Then let's make sure they stay straight. That night, while snow piled against the windows, Lily placed a folded piece of paper on the dining table. Tom unfolded it carefully. In crooked letters, she had written, "Thank you for hearing me." He stood there for a long time, the sound of the wind echoing faintly through the house. Somewhere deep inside, beneath all the years of noise, something warm began to stir. Winter settled deeper over Akron, blanketing the streets and rooftops in layers of silence. The snow no longer felt like a stranger outside Tom's house. It had become part of their rhythm. Each morning, Tom woke early, made coffee, and listened for movement from the guest room. Sometimes Lily slept late, other times she padded softly down the hallway, her small footsteps leaving patterns on the wooden floor. One morning she appeared beside him, still in her flannel pajamas, clutching a sketchbook. "Can I draw?" she asked. "Of course," he said. She climbed onto the tall chair at the kitchen island, setting the book before her. Her drawings were rough shapes of houses. Crooked trees, a sun too large for the page, but there was always one thing she drew perfectly: 3 tiny dots lined up in a row. "What are those?" Tom asked once. Her pencil paused. "Sounds," she whispered. "When I draw them, it's quiet inside." He didn't ask more. The world had already taken enough from her. He wouldn't take the mystery, too. By late January, the investigation into Haven Way reached the news. Reporters swarmed the story of the girl in the box and inevitably of the man who found her. Articles described Tom as a cold-blooded millionaire seeking redemption, accusing him of staging a rescue to polish his image. Photos of his construction sites, even of his home, filled online feeds. The phone rang constantly, investors demanding statements, lawyers urging him to distance himself. Lily noticed his growing tension. She'd find him standing by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes distant. "Are they mad at you?" she asked one night. Tom forced a smile. "Just people talking. Because you helped me." He exhaled slowly. "Because people don't always understand why someone helps." She studied him with a seriousness far beyond her age. "You don't look bad to me." Her words pierced through the fog of worry like a small flame. Days later at his office downtown, Tom faced his board of directors. The conference room smelled of polished wood and tension. Public confidence is dropping, and one executive said, "We recommend a statement denying personal involvement." Tom folded his hands. "You mean deny I was there?" "Clarify your role," another corrected, voice tight. "This kind of sympathy scandal ruins credibility." Tom looked around the table, men and women in expensive suits, their faces sharp with fear. He realized he didn't belong here anymore. The company that once reflected his ambition now looked like a cage made of glass. When the meeting ended, he walked out without a word. However, by evening he had signed his resignation. The press called it a breakdown. He called it breathing. Back home, he found Lily building a small fort from couch cushions. She peeked out, eyes wide. "Are we moving?" "No," he said, kneeling beside her. "We're just starting something new." That week, he sold his downtown apartment and moved permanently to the small house by the woods. He let go of the noise, the endless emails, the interviews. In their place came small things: hot soup, shared laughter, the rustle of pages as Lily learned to read beside the fire. One night she asked, "Do you still hear it, the tapping?" She nodded. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but it's not scary anymore." "What does it mean?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe it's a reminder to listen." She smiled faintly, then yawned. "Good, because I like when you listen." Outside, snow fell thick and silent. The house glowed with firelight, a pocket of warmth in the frozen world. But peace never stays untested. One cold afternoon, Tom received a call from a journalist. "Mr. Whitaker," the woman said, "we have new evidence suggesting the Haven Way case ties directly to one of your former partners, Leland Pierce." Any comment? Tom's grip tightened on the phone. "No comment," he said flatly and hung up. But his heart thudded with dread. Leland had been his friend, once, and if the reports were true, the rot went deeper than he'd imagined. That night, he couldn't sleep. He walked through the dark house past the soft ticking of the clock until he stopped outside Lily's room. The lamp still glowed. She was awake, drawing again. He knocked gently. "Hey, kiddo, it's late." She turned, holding up her page. On it, she'd drawn two stick figures, one tall, one small, standing under falling snow. Between them, three dots hovered in the air. "It's us," she said proudly. "See? The dots mean we can hear each other." Tom sat on the floor beside her bed, emotion catching in his throat. "You're a good artist, Lily." She tilted her head. "You're not sad anymore, not when you're here." Lily leaned over and pressed the drawing into his hands. "Then you keep this, in case you forget how to listen." He tucked it carefully into his coat pocket, the paper soft and warm from her hands. Outside, the storm thickened, wind whistling through the trees. Tom lay awake long after Lily slept, the picture resting on the nightstand beside him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The tapping he once heard beneath the ground had changed. It was no longer a cry for help, but the rhythm of two hearts learning to beat in the same quiet. By February, the snow in Akron turned heavier, piling along the curbs and burying the fences like waves frozen in midair. Tom had started to think of winter as a second heartbeat, steady cold, but alive. Life with Lily settled into small, predictable patterns. Each morning they shoveled the path to the mailbox. Each evening they cooked something simple together. Sometimes she read aloud from children's books, her voice growing stronger every day. One evening she sat cross-legged on the floor by the fire, tracing her finger over the picture of a rabbit. "Do rabbits get cold?" she asked. "They have fur," Tom answered, "and burrows to hide in." She looked up. "What if they get buried?" He paused. "Then they dig until they find the air again." Lily nodded solemnly. "Like me." The words made him swallow hard. He reached over, brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "Exactly like you." Outside, the wind pushed snow against the windows, making the glass tremble. Tom stirred the fire, feeling warmth chase away the chill. For the first time, the house felt like it belonged to them both. But the world outside had not forgotten. News of his resignation and the ongoing Haven Way investigation resurfaced. Headlines screamed about missing money cover-ups and the millionaire's secret. Leland Pierce appeared on television insisting that Tom's involvement was suspicious. He smiled smoothly, saying, "It's tragic how some people exploit tragedy." Tom turned off the TV. He could take the lies. He had lived with worse. But what he feared most was Lily hearing them. The next day at the small school she had just started attending, the teacher called him mid-afternoon. "Mr. Whitaker, there's been a problem. Could you come in?" When he arrived, Lily sat in the corner of the office, her eyes red. The principal sighed. A classmate teased her. "Said you only saved her for publicity." She threw a book. Tom knelt beside her. "Did you do that?" She bit her lip, refusing to meet his eyes. "Are you pretending?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the tremor in her voice. "Pretending everyone says you just wanted people to like you." He reached for her hand, small and shaking. "No, Lily, I helped you because I couldn't walk away." "Then why don't they believe you?" "Because believing in good things," he said softly, "makes people face how far they've fallen from them." Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry again. Instead, she leaned into him. "I believe you." Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep, Tom stood by her door, watching the faint light spill across her face. He felt both fierce pride and helplessness. The world was cruel in ways children shouldn't know. A few days later, reporters gathered outside the house. Snowflakes clung to their cameras as they shouted questions. Tom ignored them until one called out, "Is it true, Haven Way? Was your partner's charity? Are you protecting him?" Tom stopped, turned toward the voice. "I'm protecting a child. That's all anyone should need to know." He closed the door before more questions could fly. Inside, Lily stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed bear. "Are they bad people?" she asked. "They're just scared," he said gently. "Scared that kindness is real." That night, Lily refused to sleep alone. She curled up on the couch while Tom read beside her. At some point, she whispered, "If people don't like you anymore, will I have to go away?" He lowered the book. "You're not going anywhere." She stared into the fire. "Promise, I promise." The next morning, Tom called his lawyer. "I'm done answering questions. I won't fight them in the press." "Then what will you do?" the lawyer asked. "I'll live my life," Tom replied. "They can write whatever they want. I have a little girl who likes pancakes." Weeks passed. The storm of rumors slowly quieted. The Haven Way trial exposed the truth. Leland's company had funneled donations through false accounts. Tom was cleared of every accusation. Still, he didn't celebrate. He simply shoveled the driveway and let the cold air fill his lungs. One evening, Lily returned from school carrying a folded paper. She handed it to him shyly. "I wrote something for you." On the mighty and shaky handwriting there were the words, "Sometimes people can't hear kindness because they're too busy talking. But I can." Tom felt the lump rise in his throat. He folded the note, slid it into his wallet. "That's the best thing anyone's ever written me." She grinned, missing tooth and all. "Better than a contract." Much better. That weekend they built a snowman in the yard. Lily named it Mr. Quiet. When they finished, she said, "He's smiling because he can finally listen." Tom laughed, startled by how good it felt. He realized he hadn't laughed freely in years. The sound startled the crows from the trees. As dusk fell, Lily looked up at him. "Will it always snow here?" "Not forever," he said. "But there will always be winter somewhere. Then we can move there when it melts." He smiled. "Sure, kiddo, wherever it's winter." Later, as night deepened, Tom tucked her in. She groped for his hand and whispered, "Can you still hear it?" The tapping. He nodded always. "What does it say now?" He thought for a moment, brushing her hair back. "It says, don't stop listening." Outside, the wind sighed through the trees. The snowman in the yard stood watch under the porch light. In the warm quiet of the small house, Tom listened to the faint breathing of a child who finally slept without fear, and to the silence that no longer felt empty. By the time March crept in, the snow began to soften around the edges. Icicles dripped like tiny clocks measuring the slow passing of winter. For the first time in months, the air carried a hint of warmth. Tom watched the change from the porch every morning, coffee steaming in his hands, Lily's laughter drifting through the half-open window. Life had become quiet and full in ways he hadn't known he'd needed. Lily went to school, made one or two friends, and brought home drawings of houses, stars, and hearts that always had two figures standing beside each other. She pinned them above her bed, and sometimes she'd whisper, "Now it looks like home." Tom had started sketching again, not buildings for profit, but small wooden shelters, simple and warm. He kept the drawings in a folder labeled Hope Houses. The idea came after he passed an underpass one evening and saw a group of homeless men huddled beside a fire barrel. He couldn't forget their faces, the way they looked up at him, not with anger, but with quiet resignation. That night, he told Lily about them over dinner. "Do you think everyone should have a warm place to sleep?" "Of course," she said, "even people who did bad things. Snow doesn't care who you are." He smiled at her logic. "Then maybe we should build something." Her eyes lit up, like a big blanket for everyone. Something like that. In the weeks that followed, he began using his savings to build a few temporary shelters on an unused piece of land behind his property. He hired 2 local carpenters and worked beside them, his hands blistered, but his spirit lighter. Lily helped by handing him nails and sketching flowers on the wooden walls. She called the place the Snow Garden. When the first small house was finished, Lily stood inside and whispered, "It's warm. It feels like a story that isn't sad anymore." Tom felt his throat tighten. That's the idea. Word spread quickly. Neighbors dropped by with blankets, food, and questions. Some praised him. Others murmured that he was chasing attention again. The local news ran a short piece titled, "Whitaker's Winter Project Redemption or Publicity." Tom didn't care. He had stopped caring about noise long ago, but not everyone stayed quiet. One afternoon, he received a call from an unknown number. "You think you're some kind of hero?" a rough voice growled. "You ruined people's careers when you dug that girl up. Haven Way wasn't your fight." The line went dead before Tom could reply. He didn't tell Lily. He simply tightened security around the property and worked faster. The shelters were nearly done when a government inspector arrived citing zoning violations. "You can't build housing on private land without authorization," the man said. "You'll have to tear them down." Tom tried reasoning with him, but laws were laws. That evening, as he explained it to Lily, she looked up, her face serious. "So we can't help people anymore. We'll find another way." He promised, though he didn't yet know how. The next day, something unexpected happened. A group of townspeople, teachers, retired workers, even a few strangers showed up carrying shovels and lumber. "You helped one child," an elderly woman said. "Let us help the rest." By nightfall, 20 people were working under the dim porch lights, hammering, painting, laughing through the cold. Tom watched them astonished. The noise was no longer harsh, it was human. When the inspector returned, he saw the crowd and hesitated. "I can't stop all of you," he said finally, "but you didn't hear that from me." Then he turned and walked away. Spring sunlight began to melt the snow around the snow garden. Each day, new faces arrived, people seeking warmth, others bringing supplies. Lily made name tags for everyone and hung them on a wall of the first cabin. That way, she said, no one here is invisible. Tom built a wooden sign and placed it by the entrance. The snow garden, a place to begin again. It wasn't perfect. Roofs leaked, walls creaked, but laughter filled the place like heat. For the first time, Tom saw strangers treating one another, not as charity cases, but as neighbors. One evening, he and Lily sat by the fire pit watching sparks drift into the night. "Do you think people can really change?" he asked. Lily tilted her head. "You did," he smiled. "Maybe you changed me," she shrugged. "Maybe we changed together." The wind rustled through the trees, no longer sharp with winter's bite. Above them, the stars shimmered faint but steady. Before going to bed, Lily placed 3 small stones in a row outside their cabin door. Tom noticed and asked, "What's that for?" "So if anyone comes at night," she said, "they'll know we're listening." He crouched down beside her. "I think that's the best kind of doorbell." When she had gone to sleep, he lingered outside, looking over the snow garden. Lanterns glowed in the windows. Voices murmured softly inside. Somewhere a baby cried and someone else sang a lullaby. It wasn't the skyline of the empire he once built, but it was more alive than any tower he'd ever owned. Tom realized that what he had been searching for all along wasn't success. It was the sound beneath the snow, the quiet truth of being needed and hearing others again. Spring arrived, gently melting the last traces of snow. From the roofs of the snow garden, the ground turned soft and dark, releasing the smell of earth that had been hidden all winter. Children ran between the small wooden cabins, chasing each other with paper kites Lily had made from leftover blueprints. Their laughter carried across the field like music. Tom watched from the porch, his coat unbuttoned for the first time in months. The sun warmed his face, but a faint weariness clung to his movements. The past months had taken more out of him than he cared to admit. Yet when he looked at Lily, all thin arms and bright eyes, he felt strength return. "Mr. Tom," she shouted, waving a kite shaped like a heart. "Look, it flies." He smiled, shielding his eyes. "Told you, it just needed wind." She laughed, spinning until she stumbled into the grass. When she caught her breath, she looked up and said, "Do you think winter will come back always?" he said. "But that's not a bad thing. Snow reminds us how to start over." That afternoon, people from the nearby town arrived carrying boxes of supplies, books, bread, blankets. They had heard about the snow garden and wanted to keep it alive. Tom greeted each of them, shaking hands, thanking them quietly. The place had grown beyond him now. It had become its own heartbeat. At sunset, he sat with Lily near the fire pit. The flames flickered low, casting gold light on their faces. "You know," he said, "when I first dug that hole in the snow, I thought I was saving you, but maybe you were saving me." Lily leaned against his arm. "From what?" "From silence," he said. "From forgetting how to listen." She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Can we stay here forever?" He looked around the cabins, the people talking softly, the smell of smoke in the air. "Maybe not forever," he said, "but as long as this place needs us." Lily smiled. "Then it's forever for now." Days passed in gentle rhythm. The snow garden became a small community. Tom taught the older boys how to fix broken doors. Lily read stories to younger children by the fire. Every night before going to sleep, she still tapped 3 times on the wall, and every night he tapped back. One morning, Tom woke early to find the field covered in dew. The sky was pale, streaked with gold. He walked to the entrance where a new wooden sign had been placed overnight. On it, in neat, childlike handwriting, were the words, "We listen here." He ran his fingers across the carved letters, feeling the grooves beneath his skin. Behind him, Lily called, "Do you like it?" Everyone helped write it. He turned, smiling. "It's perfect." She ran up beside him, slipping her small hand into his. "Now no one will forget to listen." Together they stood there as the morning sun broke through the clouds, spreading light over the field. The wind moved softly through the cabins, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter and hammering the pulse of life continuing. For the first time in years, Tom felt no pull toward the city, no hunger for power or success. He had found something stronger, Something quieter. It was the sound of people breathing together, of hearts learning to trust again. As Lily leaned her head against his arm, she whispered, "Do you still hear it?" He smiled at the horizon, always. And when the breeze stirred the grass, it almost sounded like three gentle taps beneath the earth, reminding him that some echoes never fade, they just grow into something brighter. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.